So here it is, it's the end of June, which is really hard to believe. And you'd think that all the planting that I'm gonna do in the garden is done, but in fact it is not. I ordered some new pots about a month ago, end of May, and I never guessed that they would actually take over 4 weeks to get here, but I got some of these air pots and am hoping to try these out with some different plants that I have this summer that I've grown from seeds. I also picked up some new plants from the nursery, and I'm gonna try putting a few of those in the 3 air pots that I got here. So I wanna do a little bit of a garden tour for the end of June here, just to show you what I've been growing, some of the successes I've had and some of the failures I've had, which seems to be pretty common. I guess that's how you learn, is through those failures, but definitely by far this year is better than last year. So let's go ahead and take a look at what's growing in the garden. So I'm going to go ahead and start in the berry patch, because this was one of the first things that we actually planted in this particular area when we established that we wanted our garden to be here. We used to have clotheslines here, and we never really used them because there were a lot of mining bees, which are like ground bees, but they don't sting. They're just really annoying because they're literally everywhere. So we decided to fill this all in with mulch, which did help to get rid of most of the mining bees, and use the clothesline posts in order for a potential trellis for our berries. So we have a few different types of raspberries, as well as the blackberry, blueberries, and our temporary elderberry patch here. Let's just go ahead and start right here at the end, and I'll talk about the different types of berries that we have. At the very end here, we have our black raspberry plant. When I bought this, I was actually told it was a blackberry, but when I look at the underside of the leaf and see that it's white, that's going to tell me that it's actually a black raspberry. And you can see that they are just coming into season, and they're getting ripe, and they're really super yummy. If we continue down the line, the next couple bushes that we have are red raspberries. I can't remember all the types that we planted. One was a coho red, but I can't remember the second one. And they all kind of come into season at different times of the year, which is really good. So then we have berries at different times. And as you can see, they have sprouted up all over the ground. Even the black raspberry has shot up, new growth everywhere. So we are getting more of a yield this year, as opposed to last year when we first planted them, which we virtually got nothing. But I think next year will be a much bigger harvest. At the very end of these berries here, we have an actual true blackberry. If we take a look at the underside of the leaves, you can see that they're green instead of white, which tells us it's a blackberry. And this is a thornless blackberry. It is actually getting a few berries on it. You can see those right here, which I'm kind of excited about. I didn't expect much, being the first year that we planted it. But it has started putting on some new growth. The flowers on these are really pretty, these pinkish purple flowers. So next year, hopefully we'll get some more fruit from this thornless true blackberry. These were 2 new additions, these 2 blueberry plants here. We have 2 varieties, a Duke and a Patriot, which we're told would grow well in our zone 6A. And they actually did come with some berries on them, which we got to enjoy over the last month, but they are done for now. But they have been putting on a lot of new growth, which is really good to see. And then past our blueberries, we have our temporary elderberry patch. So we decided this year, since we weren't sure where we wanted to actually establish our larger elderberry patch, that we would put these in pots and let them root in pots and then plant them in the fall for the spring. They are starting to flower a little bit. I don't expect much from them. One, because they're first year plants from cuttings, and two, because I'm sure they'd rather be in the ground than in pots here. But this works for now, and in the fall we're going to establish a larger elderberry patch in our side field, the northwest field, and that's where they are going to go. And hiding in amongst the elderberry, and if you didn't know your plants, you might think this actually was another elderberry, but it is actually a volunteer staghorn sumac. You might be wondering, if you know anything about sumac, why on earth I would be growing that. And the reason is because you can actually take the red berries when they're ripe, and you can steep them and make like a tart type of tea. You can add a little sweetener, and it tastes kind of like a sweet tart. It's really good, and it's high in vitamin C. And most of these grow in disturbed areas along the road, but I'd like to have one growing in a cleaner place so I can feel safe about harvesting those berries. So the first two beds that I got to plant this year were my two wooden beds that we transplanted from the old garden space. And my mom actually came down in May, and bless her heart, she helped me plant these. We planted them in the rain. Literally, it was pouring, which actually was kind of fun. It was reminiscent of days when we would camp when we were younger. But there's a lot going on in here. So let me just quickly tell you what we have going on in this first bed. So first off, as you can see, I put up this trellis lengthwise over the bed. We had it actually going the skinnier side last year, so it didn't cover as much area. I love this setup so much better, and I'm using these bamboo stakes then attached to the top of the trellis in order to trellis up pretty much all my plants that need trellis, and it's working out really well. So in this first row here, I have eggplants. Now this is an amazing thing for me because I've pretty much given up on eggplants because they always get eaten by the flea beetles, and I never really seem to get any fruit. And I didn't think I actually liked eggplant until my mom made her, it was kind of like a keto eggplant parmesan, and it was so good that I decided I'm going to take another shot at growing eggplants. So these are all staked up to the trellis, and they're actually starting to flower. Let me see if I can get in. So here is our first little eggplant flower that has opened up. I know I have a couple of them, so I'm going to be really excited to watch these. So as for the flea beetle damage, we did get some. And you can probably see it. You can see all those little dots on there. Those are from those flea beetles. We've had a couple other things sneak up here and eat some plants, but we have fertilized really well this year, and these eggplants, I think, were just healthy enough that they could overcome that damage. I didn't use any chemicals or powders on them, and they're growing really well, so I'm really excited to see this. So next, just behind, so here's our eggplants. The next row we have here, which is kind of a mess, is all of my tomatillos. And I never imagined my tomatillos would actually get as big as they are, but they're huge. And there's very little information out there as far as video resources on how to actually prune your tomatillos. So I'm kind of stabbing in the dark here. I really haven't done much pruning. But if I sneak down underneath here, let me see if I can get in. I actually have little tomatillos that are growing on here, and that is really exciting as well. Lots of flowers. So hopefully I'll get a good harvest of tomatillos. I have both yellow and purple in here. So the next row that we have here is my San Marzano Lungo #2 tomatoes, and they were grown from seed, and they've been staked up and they're starting to flower. So I'm excited about those. I'm going to try to grow some more tomatoes this year other than just this patch. I'm hoping to actually freeze dry these and turn them into powder. I saw someone do that and have been anxious to actually try that. So this is one of two very pathetic rows of peppers. There's some jalapenos in here, and there are some baby bells, and they might look pretty crowded, and that's only because they weren't growing. So I threw in the jalapenos with the baby bells. But as you can see, I am not having a good pepper year, and I didn't have a good pepper year either. And if you hear all that little buzzing around me, the hummingbirds are going nuts, and they're weaving in between my legs, which is so funny. So I did actually buy some other peppers from the nursery just to make sure we have some peppers. And I guess peppers are that thing that I'm gonna have to do some more research on. I'm just not doing well with growing peppers this year. Next to the peppers, I have a patch of oregano, and then just behind that are some seed planted onions. I can't remember, I think these are Spanish onions, and they're actually doing a lot better than I would have ever imagined. I never thought they'd actually get as big as what they have, so I've planted these way too close, but we'll just see what happens. Beside those onions, I have another patch of yellow pear tomatoes. Actually, 3 yellow pear tomatoes. And then this guy, this second one that we see right here, this is one that comes up on its own every year. It's a type of cherry tomato. I have no idea what it is. But all I can say is it is super tenacious. You let the fruit fall, those seeds hit the ground, and they will sprout up everywhere the following year. And I can really attest to that because the dirt that is in these beds was completely emptied out of the beds. It was moved into this garden space. The beds were moved, and then the dirt was put back in, and these little tomato seeds still found their way to grow. And I have probably pulled out, I don't know, more than 3 dozen little seedlings that have started to grow, and then some of them I did let grow. Here's my second row of very pathetic peppers. They are a little bit bigger. We've gotten them some fertilizer, but still, I just really don't have a lot of hopes for these. But you know, who knows? Maybe by the end of the season, I will have another video that'll show these peppers producing fruit. We'll see. And then finally, in this bed, I have a row of red onions. I did square foot gardening on these, so they're planted 9 per square. I still think that's pretty close. I think next year I might spread these out a little bit, but as always, we'll see how this goes. Let's move on to the next wooden bed. So here's our second wooden bed, and this was the second bed that we planted, and it is mainly brassicas. There's a couple zucchinis, cucumber, and watermelon, and then there's a few other random things that just decided to grow in here, I put in here. So one thing I'll say about the brassicas is we were doing really well, they were growing really well, and then of course the cabbage moths came, and you can see we have now dusted them with Captain Jack's and are hoping that this is gonna cut down on the damage, but you can see some of these were really devastated here. And I've actually never used any dust on them before. This is something new. We've used BT, we've had some success. Covering them actually gave us the best success, which is probably what I'll go back to in the future. But we've had some cold weather, which these brassicas have really liked. They got planted a little bit late. I'm not expecting a lot from my brassicas. I'm not a great brassica grower, but every year I get a little bit better. So one day I'm hoping to get myself a head of cabbage or broccoli or cauliflower. We'll just see. There's some alyssum that's in here, and I also have a teddy bear sunflower that I'm really excited to see bloom there. And I have a second teddy bear sunflower right here, kind of in the middle. Now these are 2 zucchinis that my mom gave me. No idea what variety, but they are growing super well. You can see they're already starting to flower. And I am trying to trellis them up. So I've used 3 bamboo sticks to support them in hopes that I can kind of wrap some string around as the stem gets longer to get them up off of the bed a little bit. Because there's also a cucumber. This is a cucumber under here, also from my mom. She had no idea what it was. We just planted it. This thing that's running right here, this is our crimson sweet watermelon, and there's a couple hiding in here. And they are actually starting to flower. And I think I saw a tiny little fruit that is coming on there. So we'll see how this goes. They have the option to use the trellis, or if they actually just want to go down to the ground and put some roots in to the mulch, if they can do that. I'm okay with either way, but let's kind of zoom in here on the zucchini. I don't know if you can see, we're actually starting to get some little zucchini in there. You see it? Right here. So, looking forward to some zucchini dinners. Now, if you take a look here, here's one of those tomatoes I was telling you about. Seriously, these are tenacious. I'm gonna pull this one out though. I have enough cherry tomatoes. There's one more sunflower here. You can see some more watermelon. And then this is one of those cherry tomatoes that came up. It was pretty strong. So I allowed it to stay here, and I've staked it up, even though I've read that tomatoes and watermelons are not the best companion plants. We'll just see how it goes. Let's talk about the garden towers. So these are the 2 different type of vertical growers that I have here. This first one that we have here I've had for a number of years. This is called a garden tower, and all the compartments are linked together, so the soil's kind of one big column. And in the center, if you see this little top here, that top can come off, and you can put worms in there for composting your dirt and kind of climbing through, which is kind of neat. I don't have any worms in there right now, but I do have a worm bin in the house, and if I find I have an excess of worms, maybe I'll throw some in here as well. I do finally have a few things growing in here. You can see I've got some different types of basil. I've got some strawberries in the top, and yes, another sunflower. I also planted some, I call them Egyptian beans. I don't know why. They're a blue type of pea, like the flower is blue. And I was told when I was given the seeds that these were the seeds found in King Tut's tomb. I don't know if that's actually true or not, but they're really pretty. So I have some of those planted in here along the side, a few onions in the top, but I'm actually not having great success in either of my vertical growers this summer, and I'm not sure why. Next to this, we have the green stalk, and this is a really cool system because each of the compartments are independent of one another, and so you could actually unstack them if you had to, and all the dirt will stay in that one compartment, then you can put them back on top. I actually can't do that with the orange garden tower. So just like my garden tower, my green stalk is doing really poorly. That's not a reflection on the company or the product at all. I'm sure I'm doing something wrong here. Everything I have planted in here except these Egyptian peas, which are growing great, everything is stunted. So for example, these are sweet basil seeds that I planted, probably 6 weeks ago, and they got to this size and then they just totally stopped. Same with my chives. Same with any of the little bok choy that I planted. As a matter of fact, I have a bok choy that actually went to seed. So this little bok choy, it got a couple leaves, stayed like that for a month, and then it just flowered. So obviously I've done something where these plants are stressed. I used really good potting soil. These lettuces were transplants, but they just never grew either. They did nothing. Tomatillos, little nasturtiums, strawberry calendula. Literally the only thing that's doing well in here are these peas. So I don't know, I know that these peas are, I think they're nitrogen fixing, so maybe it has something to do with that. I've got to do some research. There's my pathetic little butter crunch, planted a month ago. That's all I got. So I'm going to do some research. Maybe I'll contact the company and see if they have some recommendations and see what I can do to fix this problem. Can't forget the rosemary. I just potted this little guy up last night into a bigger pot. It seems really happy. So every good garden needs a pot of rosemary. So let's go ahead and move on and take a look at the birdies beds. So we had a lot of ideas about building beds on our own, and time just ran away from us, and it's a lot of work to do that. And when we calculated it, we just figured it would just be easier to just actually buy raised beds. So we got some of these birdie beds. We got 4 that are the 8-in-1 that we see back here. And then yesterday I finally received, after 4 long weeks, my round birdie bed, which I'm hoping to do the 3 sisters growing of the corn, squash, and beans in here. Might be late to do that, but we'll see how it goes. Let's talk about what we've planted in here. So I've kind of had companion planting in mind this year, but I'm going to be completely honest. I don't know that some of these plants actually go together, but we're going to find out. So most of my beds just have a lot of random things. My thought was I'm going to try to confuse some of the insects that like to eat up all your plants. And so this bed has a lot of different stuff in it. So we love our summer squashes. So of course I have planted some more zucchini. This one that I have here, this is a black beauty, and it's really started to take off and look healthy. And then the one that I have here, this is a type of yellow squash. I think it's a straight neck squash. And I've got a little basil that is planted in between with its little pal growing next to it. Some mushrooms. We use a lot of mushroom compost. We get a lot of mushrooms in here, and they seem to really help the soil. Behind these zucchini and yellow squash, I have a lemongrass. This one I bought. My sister gave me another one. I'm excited about this one. I've never grown lemongrass before, so I think it grows as an annual here in Zone 6A, but I'm looking forward to harvesting that. Here's some transplanted dill that my sister gave me. I'm also growing some other dill. I was actually surprised that this dill transplanted so well and is growing. It's actually getting ready to flower, so I'm going to let it do that. While it's a little late for peas, these were some mammoth peas that I had in pots for way too long. They don't really like to trellis up just open sticks, these bamboo sticks I have, without some clips. So we'll see what they do, but they are starting to flower here. So I might actually put some rope between each of the bamboo stakes and see if they will grow up that as well. And then hiding in the middle is a lovage plant, again from my sister. On the opposite end here, I have a couple more 1-2 eggplants, and they seem to be looking pretty healthy. A little bit of flea beetle damage, but they seem to have overcome that. Another alyssum. We've got a nasturtium, and look, you guessed it, some more squash. Let's see what kinds we have over here. So this first one, this is a baby round zucchini. I've never grown those before, but I've been looking forward to growing them. And then behind it is a scalloped patty pan, and I grew those last year. We never ate them. I don't know why, but the chickens did, and they loved them. But I'm gonna eat them this year. They were so much fun to grow. Such a unique shape, so I'm looking forward to those. Off to the side here, I've got 2 pots of really healthy looking potatoes. I don't remember who's in what pot, but I know I have a set of red potatoes and I have a set of purple potatoes. And they have come up, they're looking great. So hopefully we'll get a good little baby potato harvest. So I don't want to forget, the end of this one raised bed, I have a pot of sweet potatoes. These look pretty pathetic, but they are getting new growth on them. Actually planted them late. We're gonna see what they do. I have another pot of sweet potatoes that looks much better. We'll take a look at that here in a second, but we'll see how these guys do. All right, so over here we have our two other birdie beds, which we kind of put long ways here. And we put a trellis over the middle of each of them. We've got a spaghetti squash, and then I've got a row of a variety of beans. I've got dragon's tongue, Chinese noodle, and I forget what, blue lake. They're all a type of trellising bean. They seem to be doing pretty good. So they're gonna be able to grow up this trellis. And then at the end, I have a acorn squash. Now I'm a little bit concerned about the plants in here. As you can see, they're a little bit yellow. I could be overwatering. We have fertilized, so I'm not sure. I'm not an expert on leaf color. I'm still trying to figure this all out, but we'll see how that goes. The same thing is happening in this bed that is just behind here. Everything I seem to put in here is kind of yellow. This is a curry squash, or like little red squash. There's some little basil plants beside it, some calendula. The only thing that does seem to be looking really good and healthy in here is I've got more of those Egyptian peas. But all of my cucumbers, they just look unhappy, and they're not growing, and they're flowering in spot, which tells me that they're stressed. We fertilize, I'm not sure. I don't know if there's a soil issue. Same is true for the nasturtium. Here is some bush beans. They seem to be doing okay, but I have a couple more calendula and another, can't remember what this little squash is. This is my honey nut squash. This is the one I was most excited about growing, and again, it's doing nothing. The leaves are kind of yellow, it's not growing. This is all new soil that I've put in here. So I don't know, if anyone has any recommendations on what's going on with yellowing plants and new soil, let me know. I'm at a loss. So the last birdie's bed that we have here is literally all strawberries. My husband thought I was crazy for just planting a bed of strawberries, but a couple strawberry plants isn't really going to do anything for us. So I want to be able to have a really good harvest of strawberries at some point. These are ever-bearing. I've got two different types that are supposed to grow well here and be fairly prolific. They were literally just little root balls that you planted in the ground, and they have grown a lot. There's also, if you know your plants, there's some borage that's hiding out in here. I also have a couple calendula in here, and actually here's one of those borages that's starting to flower, and that will hopefully attract some of our pollinators here. But this bed is doing well. These strawberries are throwing out runners. I don't know that I'll let all of the runners go. I would like to hopefully get some fruit from them this year. So we'll see what happens. As I keep saying, I feel like that's what we're doing with our garden. We're just gonna kind of see what happens. All right, so behind this birdie's bed, here is my really nice pot of sweet potatoes. These are purple sweet potatoes. They were planted probably 3 to 4 weeks earlier than the last set, so you can see they've got a lot more growth. I'm really hoping for something, a good harvest from this particular bucket, because we've got really healthy looking vines here, and that's pretty exciting. So these last two buckets you see here and here, these are also potatoes, and they were actually organic potatoes I got from the store that started to chit. And I thought, why not? Why not throw them in there and see what they do? I planted them a couple weeks ago. I haven't seen anything yet. I keep hoping that I'm gonna see them popping up, but to date, nothing. So I don't know that these are gonna do anything. The last ones that I grew, the ones over there, they started popping up through the top really within a matter of maybe 5 days. So I'm gonna give these guys another week. If nothing pops up, I'm probably just gonna plant something else in these pots. I've got plenty else to plant. So this is just kind of the end of the garden. We do have more garden space that we plan to plant eventually. Most of what I have now is in pots. So we've got cilantro that's gone to seed here, and some dill, and also some shallots or shallots, however you say those. I've never grown those before. I didn't expect them to do as well. I grew them from seed and they are doing fantastic. I need to get rid of some of that clover in there, but I am excited to see what they'll turn into. So the last thing I have here is for vegetables is what I have in these pots. And these are those grow pots. If you take a look and see, they have these little things here. They are essentially a self-watering pot. There's a little plastic cage that goes down in the pot. And if you see at the bottom of the pot, there's a little hole. So there's no dirt below that hole because of that plastic cage. So the plant sits above that. And then this little thing bobs up and down. This one doesn't want to bob at all. There we go. And it tells you what your water level is. And if the water level gets too high, it will actually run out that hole so you don't oversaturate your plants. So I tried these last year. I didn't fertilize anybody. And I'm just gonna tell you, fertilizing is the key, especially if you're growing in containers and in buckets. You've got to fertilize. So the plants in here are doing a lot better than they did last year. We've got, I think this is a Trinidad scorpion here in the end. I've got 2 more of those crimson sweet watermelons. It's just kind of an experiment to see how they'll do in here. The tomatillos, purple and yellow, they don't look so happy in comparison to the tomatillos I have in my bed. They might come out since my other tomatillos are doing so well, but we'll just wait and see. Oh, hey, look, another zucchini. And another yellow squash. This one, again, it actually is a little bit yellow on the leaves, so if anyone has any thoughts on yellowing leaves on your squash, please let me know. This was a transplanted cherry tomato, one of the ones that show up all on its own, and the lemongrass that my sister gave me. So I've just got a few final random thing outside of the seedlings I have growing in my greenhouse. Here's a pot, another pot of strawberries that I got. I might have got these at Lowe's. They were actually growing in this pot and they were doing so well and they had fruit coming out. It was beautiful, and then all of a sudden it just started to die, and I think it just got root bound. So I moved it over into a bigger pot and gave it a little trimming. Looks like it needs a little more trimming. And it is an ever-bearing, so maybe we'll see some more fruit on it here in the future. These little planters used to grow lettuce, and they've kind of become grow tables. And I'd like to get the plants out of them so I can turn them back into little lettuce farms, because the lettuce did really well there. I still got some peppers to plant that I got from the nursery, so that's why they're so big. And of course, lots of squash, zucchini, cucumbers, some other flowers. I grew some lupine this year. I need to get those in the ground because I really love lupine. So these are probably the last things that I have to get in the ground here. So that is it for my first ever garden tour. Thanks for stopping by, taking a walk through my garden with me. I really am looking forward to seeing how things change over the next month. So stay tuned for more adventures on MountainMud Homestead.